new arrangement into with the EU that involve Northern Ireland must respect the principle of consent that is at the heart of the Belfast Agreement. And that means that any new arrangements must protect the constitutional integrity of the United Kingdom and Northern Ireland's place within the UK.
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree that it's essential that we recognise that the Belfast Agreement itself recognised Northern Ireland's place in the UK by the consent of its people. The principle of consent is absolutely central to that. The Government is working hard and in good faith to find solutions. We've provided many papers to the EU and we welcome indications that they are looking at further solutions. We're working to find solutions and the Government will set out further detail on its approach to the protocol later today. I don't want to preempt that here, but I agree with the honourable gentleman in principle.
Liz Twist.
Question 15, Mr Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. With permission, I will answer questions 15 and 16 together. The Government has enormous sympathy for those who suffered appalling abuse while resident in the institutions covered by the report published in January. Whilst this is a devolved issue and therefore the responsibility of the Executive, the Government understands that work on an independent investigation promised to victims is underway. We will continue to work closely with the Executive to ensure that victims of today receive the help and support they need to address the trauma of the past.
Liz Twist.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The report carried out by Ulster and Queen's University shone a bright light on the truly heart-wrenching abuse suffered by women and girls over 6 decades in Northern Ireland. What confidence can the Minister give to those victims, some of whom might be watching, that politicians across these islands will do everything that we can to address the staggering injustice they suffered?
I mean, the Honourable Lady is right to highlight this report. The UK Government understands the importance of ensuring those individuals who suffered appalling abuse while resident in certain institutions in Northern Ireland receive the recognition and answers they deserve. That is why, for example, in the absence of the Executive, the Government delivered the Historical Abuse Northern Ireland Act in December 2019 to help secure a redress scheme for victims of other specific institutions. We understand that work on the independent investigation promised by the Executive is underway, with an expert panel appointed in March to establish the terms of reference. Whilst it's right that we wait for the findings of that investigation, the UK Government is committed to working closely with the Executive to help victims and their families get the help and support they need.
Christian Matheson.
Speaker, we know that girls as young as 12 were sent to the mother and baby homes and Magdalene laundries in Northern Ireland, and a research report revealed that the painful neglect and abuse suffered by many. While an expert panel discussed the next steps, what confidence can ministers provide that the lived experience of victims will be heard loud and clear in the months and years ahead, and whatever support is necessary is provided from Westminster?
The Government acknowledges the shocking findings of the report published in January around the considerable cross-border movement of women and, as he said, children. The Government understands that the Executive has begun work on its independent investigation with the expert panel appointed in March. We will work with them to ensure that this is followed up effectively, but we do want to await the outcome of their work at the devolved space.
Tim Shutt.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and can I thank the Minister of State for his response. Given the long-lasting impacts that mother and baby homes have had on victims and their families, and still to this day an incredible sense of injustice, can the Minister of State ensure that all investigations, all examinations into the mother-baby homes will have the consultation with survivors of the homes where there is real hurt and trauma? And can the Minister clarify that no further action, which is truly critical for closure, should be taken without their full involvement and their permission? Thank you.
Minister.
The Honourable Gentleman rightly recognises the importance of ensuring victims and survivors are fully involved in any investigative or review processes in order to best ensure they get acknowledgement, support and the answers they deserve. I understand, further to the points I've made previously, I also understand that the Victims and Survivors Service is continuing to work with victims and survivors to identify support and services they need, with a dedicated website and phone line to enable victims and survivors of the institutions to participate in this co-design process. But as I said, we are prepared to work with the Executive on this issue.
Shadow Minister Alex Davies.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In total, more than 14,000 women in Northern Ireland went through these so-called mother and baby homes. As other colleagues have said, a recent landmark report has revealed a shocking culture of neglect and abuse suffered by these vulnerable women over 6 decades. We know that an expert and widely respected panel is co-designing the next stage of the inquiry into this scandal. So does the Minister agree that the inquiry must be effective, robust and crucially meet the needs of victims who have had to wait far too long to receive justice?
Absolutely, I agree. I think, as you said, it is a well-respected panel that is working on this. We want to ensure that any support we can provide is available, but this is being taken forward at the devolved space, and this is truly shocking, what has been identified in this report. It is important that they make progress on this quite swiftly, and we certainly stand ready to support them.
Alexander Stafford.
19, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I speak with ministerial colleagues regularly about the great potential for Northern Ireland tourism, although not specifically about heritage sites, but I can assure the honourable member that the UK Government is a signatory to the World Heritage Convention and is committed to upholding its commitments to that. Northern Ireland is, of course, home to one of the world's most famous World Heritage sites, the Giant's Causeway and Causeway Coast, which I've had the pleasure of visiting myself. These grand and impressive basalt commons are an incredible sight, and I encourage all members to see these wonders in person.
Alexander Stafford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Northern Ireland is a jewel in the crown of our United Kingdom, boasting stunning landscapes of great natural and ecological value and heritage sites of tremendous cultural, historical and social significance, from the Dairy Walls and the Giant's Causeway, Titanic Corner and the Mountains of Mourne. What steps is my right honourable friend taking to protect and promote Northern Ireland's heritage sites and areas of outstanding beauty? And additionally, what support is he giving to the Northern Ireland Executive and relevant heritage bodies and organisations to do so?
Whilst tourism is a devolved matter, the Government continues to use every possible opportunity to promote Northern Ireland as a world-class tourist destination. I have to say my honourable friend is doing an excellent job of that himself. I'm delighted to say that I visited many of the places that he mentioned, and I was very pleased to have been over in Northern Ireland yesterday meeting local business owners in Bangor to hear about their High Street Heroes Northern Ireland campaign, a campaign celebrating the local independent retailers for another fantastic part of Northern Ireland's offer.
Question 20, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Levels of support in Northern Ireland are similar to elsewhere in the UK, reflecting the common challenge public health restrictions have posed to businesses. A government interventions such as the Job Retention Scheme and the Enterprise Scheme operate UK-wide and have together protected around 1 in 4 jobs. Support is devolved in some areas. The Executive received an additional £5 billion of Barnett funding for COVID, funding a range of interventions, including business rates holidays and small business grants, all providing crucial support to businesses.
And I thank my honourable friend for his answer and for his support for the tourism sector. I'm very pleased to say that I've been to Giant's Causeway and a most wonderful place it was. There is, of course, another way to support tourism in Northern Ireland. And Treasury and Deloitte estimates show that over a 10-year period, VAT at 5% would deliver £4.6 billion in revenue for the Treasury. And, of course, Northern Ireland, as he says, tourism is a very key sector. In that light, does my honourable friend agree with me that maintaining the current very competitive 5% VAT rate for hospitality beyond the pandemic could create new jobs, add tremendous value and prove to be a very powerful dividend for businesses, UK dividend for businesses in Northern Ireland?
Well, my honourable friend makes a point that I've certainly heard from a number of businesses in Northern Ireland. The Government has taken unprecedented measures to support the UK economy through the pandemic, including a temporary VAT reduction to 5% for the tourism and hospitality sectors, extended until the 30th of September, to further help businesses recover and transition back to the standard rate. An interim rate of 12.5% will apply until the 31st of March 2022. Raising £130 billion in 2019-20, VAT is an important source of revenue, vital for funding public services such as health, education and defence. The reduced rate is expensive, costing over £7 billion so far, so a permanently reduced or zero rate would further increase costs to UK taxpayers.
Before we move to Prime Minister's questions, I would like to inform the House that it's been just over 60 years since the first ever PMQs, which took place on the 18th of July 1961. On that day, the Speaker at the time was Sir Harry Hilton Foster, who was the last Speaker to die in post, so I hope not to reintroduce that. It was introduced PMQs by informing the House that the Prime Minister, Harold Macmillan, was willing to try this experiment for the remainder of the session. It that be the wish of the House that after 60 years, 12 Prime Ministers, PMQs has become one of the most high-profile events of the parliamentary week and is watched by constituents across the country, followers of UK politics around the world. I think we can say that the experiment has been a success, depending on who was on the answer. But I've got to say, today we mark its 60th anniversary. The Prime Minister will join the questions via video link for obvious reasons, demonstrating that Prime Minister's questions the House can adapt when we need to. I am sure that this final PMQ, before the summer recess, we will have a robust but orderly exchanges and hopefully shortish questions and answers. And finally, before we get underway, I would like to point out that the British Sign Language interpretation of Prime Minister's questions is available to watch on Parliament Live TV. And please, everyone have a good recess after tomorrow. We now come to Sally Ann Hart.
One, please, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much, and I'm delighted to be joining the House in the 60th anniversary edition of Prime Minister's Question Time, which, as you have rightly just pointed out, was, of course, an innovation introduced under Harold Macmillan, and look forward to answering colleagues' questions today. Mr. Speaker, before the House rises for summer recess tomorrow, I know that everyone will want to join me in thanking parliamentary and constituency staff and the dedicated House of Commons staff for hard work over the last year, and I hope very much that everyone has a restful break. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings, virtual meetings, I should say, with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my virtual duties in this House, I shall have further such virtual meetings later today.
Sally Ann Hart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I echo the Prime Minister's thanks to all our staff for their hard work this last year. I very much welcome the government's levelling up agenda to ensure opportunity and economic freedoms are enjoyed by every person across our four nations. Hastings and Rye is being held back, prevented from achieving its potential, largely or partly due to a lack of transport infrastructure. Will my right honourable friend promise to consider the business case for the HS1 extension from Ashford through to Hastings, Bexhill and Eastbourne and commit to the funding necessary?
My honourable friend is a fantastic advocate for the people of Hastings and Rye, and she's made the case to me before for the improvement to transport that she recommends. I know that the particular extension is being reviewed by the Department of Transport right now. A decision will be made in due course, and I'm told I simply cannot anticipate that. But what I can say is that this is the government and the party that is absolutely determined to level up across our country with better infrastructure, superb innovation, Mr. Speaker, and better skills across the whole of the UK.
We now come to the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I also thank you and all of the House of Commons staff for everything you've done to keep Parliament open and safe? Can I wish the Prime Minister that the Chequers won well in his isolation? With 500,000 people self-isolating, I think we're all a bit surprised that the Prime Minister, the Chancellor and the Cabinet Office Minister were all randomly chosen for a get-out-of-isolation free card. But it's good that the Prime Minister finally recused himself, even if it took a public outcry for the Communities Secretary to be humiliated on live TV and a trip to a country estate. Mr. Speaker, if someone is pinged by the NHS app, as millions will be over coming weeks, should they isolate? Yes or no?
Mr. Speaker, is the answer to that, and I think that everybody understands the inconvenience of being pinged, as he rightly says. Here I am. I wish I was with you in the Commons chamber today. I apologise to everybody in business up and down the land in all kinds of services, public sector or otherwise, who are experiencing inconvenience. We will be switching, as the House knows, to a system based on contact testing rather than contact isolation. But until then, Mr. Speaker, I just must remind everybody that isolation is a vital tool of our defence against the disease. You're 5 times more likely to catch it if you've been in contact with someone that gets it, someone that has it. And of course, even if you have been vaccinated, you can still pass it on, though that risk is reduced. And the overwhelming arguments, Mr. Speaker, are for getting a jab. Everybody should get a jab.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister says that everyone understands the government's position as to what you should do if you're pinged by the NHS app. That's a very interesting answer, because the government's all over the place on this. Yesterday, His business minister said the app was an advisory tool only. Another government minister, and I kid you not, said yesterday the app is just to allow you to make informed decisions. What on earth does that mean? Allow you to make informed decisions. And of course, the Prime Minister and the Chancellor spent the weekend trying to dodge isolation altogether. So, Mr. Speaker, the British people are trying to follow the rules. How can they, when his ministers keep making them up as they go along?
No, Mr. Speaker. If I may laboriously repeat the answer that I gave earlier on to the right honourable gentleman, so it's just to get it into his head yet again. Isolation is a very important part of our armoury against COVID. We're going forward, as everybody knows, to a new system on August the 16th, based on testing. But in the meantime, when you're advised to isolate, to protect others and to protect your family against the spread of the disease, then you should do so. And of course, even more important than the isolation campaign is, of course, the vaccination campaign. 3 million people of the 18 to 30 group still to get one. I think the right honourable gentleman's time would be more usefully employed, if I may say so, encouraging everybody to get vaccinated.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, everything may be calm from the Prime Minister's country retreat, but back here, the truth is, we're heading for a summer of chaos. There's a lot of noise, Mr. Speaker. Right? I hope they've all got their NHS app on. Mr. Speaker, we're heading for a summer of chaos. 1 million children were out of school last week. 1 million. And a huge number of businesses are closing because so many staff are self-isolating. So let me turn to the question of exemptions. Yesterday, the messages coming out of Number 10 about which businesses and workers might be exempt from isolation changed hour by hour. First, yesterday, there was going to be a list, and then there wasn't. And then the Prime Minister's spokesperson said this, and I quote, "We are not seeking to draw lines specifically around who is or who is not exempt." Now, I've read that, and I've reread it several times, Mr. Speaker. I haven't a clue what that means. The Road Haulage Association hit the nail on the head when they said this, and I quote, that it was thought up on the hoof without proper organisation or thought. Now, Mr. Speaker, I know the Prime Minister likes to govern by three-word slogans. I think, Mr. Speaker, on the hoof might work pretty well. So, last chance before recess. For millions of workers, this matters.
Order. Mr. Gullis, I don't need any help or assistance from yourself. The next time you point to your watch, might be better looking at Big Ben outside rather than here. Come on, Keir Starmer.
So, Mr. Speaker, last chance before recess. Can the Prime Minister just clear it up which workers and which businesses will be exempt from isolating before the 16th of August?
Mr. Speaker, I think this is really pretty feeble stuff from the right honourable gentleman. This is what's going to be a glorious 60th anniversary edition of PMQs. I've given him the answer in a letter that he had earlier on about the businesses and the sectors of industry that we think that it would be sensible now to exempt. But he can't have it both ways, Mr. Speaker. He attacks the self-isolation system. But as far as I understand the position of the right honourable gentleman when it comes to the roadmap, he actually now this week opposes going forward with step 4 as we have on as we did on Monday. He wants to keep this country, as far as I understand his position, in lockdown. And now which is it? He can't have it both ways. He can't simultaneously, Mr. Speaker, attack.
Sorry, Prime Minister. Prime Minister, just a moment. We're really struggling on the sound level. I don't know whether we can actually have the sound level turned up to hear the Prime Minister.
I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you, Prime Minister. Otherwise, you've got a great stand-in who's quite desperate. But I want to hear this, Prime Minister.
Hang on. Do you want me to have another go, Mr. Speaker? Hang on a minute. Is it this thing here?
I want quite well. People were decided to be quite rowdy, but I can hear you now. Continue halfway through.
Can you hear me, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, can you hear me?
Can hear you loud and clear, Prime Minister.
Do you want me to give that answer again?
Oh, don't worry. Just complete the end bit.
I'm very happy. I will repeat it. I'll say it as many times as you like. I think the Right Honourable Gentleman, the Leader of the Opposition, is guilty of failing to listen to what I said just now. And it's perfectly obvious that, as I said to him in a letter earlier on, that there are some businesses, some parts of our economy that, of course, need exemptions from the the isolation regime because they need to be able to carry on. And for the most part, obviously, people will have to follow the rules. We're changing it on August the 16th, by which time we will have vaccinated many more people. I understand people's frustrations, but this is one of the few real tools that we have in our armoury against the virus. And I really think that in attacking the isolation system, which is what I think the Right Honourable Gentleman is doing, he is being totally inconsistent with his earlier announcement, which seemed to be that we should stay in lockdown. If I understand the position of the Labour Party now, which is different from last week, they now don't want to go ahead with step 4. I think I'm right in that.
Kirsten.
He talks about inconsistency. 2 hours and 38 minutes to do a massive U-turn on Sunday morning. And then what have we seen in the last few days? He says I didn't listen to his answer. I did listen. I still think he's making it up. We had completely unclear announcement on Monday about exemptions, had contradictory statements all day yesterday. Now we seem to be back to the confused policy of Monday. How on earth the business is meant to plan when the Prime Minister keeps chopping and changing like this? I have to say, even after 15 months of these exchanges, I can't believe that the Prime Minister doesn't see the irony of him spending Freedom Day locked in isolation and announcing plans for a vaccine ID card. I remember when he used to say he'd eat an ID card if he ever had to produce one, and now he's introducing them. So, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to creating confusion, the Prime Minister is a super spreader. So let me try to get some clarity. Why is it okay? Why is it okay to go to a nightclub for the next 6 weeks without proof of a vaccine or a test, and then from September it will only be okay to get into a nightclub if you've got a vaccine ID card?
Hey, Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think the Labour leader traditionally has a choice in a national crisis, and that is whether to get behind the government and to offer constructive opposition, or to try endlessly to oppose for the sake of it and to try to score cheap political points. Everybody can see that we have to wait until the end of September, by which time it's only fair to the younger generation, when they will all have been offered 2 jabs, before we consider something like asking people to be double jabbed before they go into a nightclub. That's blindingly obvious to everybody. It's common sense. And I think most people in this country understand it. Most people in this country want to see the younger generation encouraged to get vaccinations. That is what, with great respect to the Right Honourable Gentleman, he should be doing, rather than trying endlessly to score what I think are vacuous political points.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister keeps asking me if I will support his chaos. No! And I want to bring the Prime Minister back to one of our earlier exchanges in this House. On the 26th of May, I asked the Prime Minister if he'd ever used the words, "COVID is only killing 80-year-olds," or words to that effect. On that day, the Prime Minister pointedly didn't deny using those words. And now we have the proof that he did. We've all now seen the Prime Minister's text message. I quote, "The median age for COVID fatalities is 82. That is above life expectancy." And we have the Prime Minister's conclusion in the same text. "So get COVID and live longer." Remind the Prime Minister, over 83,000 people aged 80 or over lost their lives to this virus. Everyone leaving behind a grieving family and loved ones. So will the Prime Minister now apologise for using those words?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, nothing I can say from this dispatch box, or from this virtual dispatch box, I should say, or nothing I can do can make up for the loss and the suffering that people have endured throughout this pandemic. And there will, of course, be a public inquiry into what has happened. But I would just remind the right honourable gentleman when he goes back over the decision-making processes that we had in those very, very difficult and dark times. But these are incredibly tough balancing decisions that you have to take. Again, you have to balance the catastrophe of the disease against the suffering that is caused by lockdowns, the impacts on mental health, the loss of life chances for young people, Mr. Speaker. And what has changed since we were thinking in those ways is, of course, that we have rolled out vaccines faster than any other country in Europe. 96%, Mr. Speaker, of people over 50 now have had a vaccine. 68% of people have had 2 jabs, Mr. Speaker. What we're trying to say to the country today, and I think the single most important serious message is, if you have not yet had your second jab, please come along and get it. And if you're over 50 and you still haven't had your second jab, or over 40, please come and get it as well. And never forget, Mr. Speaker, that if we'd followed the advice of the right honourable gentleman, we would have stayed in the European Medicines Agency and we would never have had the vaccine rollout at all.
Mr. Speaker, I think we might need to check that the line to Chequers is working, because the Prime Minister's answers have no resemblance to the questions I'm actually asking him. He's given us a list of what he can't do. What he can do, quite straightforwardly, virtually or otherwise, is say sorry. The trouble is, Mr. Speaker, nobody believes a word the Prime Minister says anymore. He promised he had a plan for social care, but he's ducked it for 2 years. He promised not to raise tax. Now he's planning a jobs tax. He promised he wouldn't cut the army or the aid budget. He's cut both. And, Mr. Speaker, he also promised that Monday would be Freedom Day. He said 18 times from that dispatch box that it'd be irreversible. But the truth is, he's let a new variant into the country, he's let cases soar, and he's left us with the highest death toll in Europe, one of the worst hit economies of any major economy. Last week, 1 million kids were off school, businesses are closing, and millions will spend their summer self-isolating. But don't worry, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's got it all under control. Because this morning we read he's got a new 3-word slogan. Keep life moving. You couldn't make it up. Mr. Speaker, isn't it clear there's only 3 words this Prime Minister needs to focus on? Get a grip.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, let's look at the position now as it was at the end of last year. And as we come to the end of this parliamentary term, let's be absolutely clear that it is thanks to the vaccine rollout, which, by the way, I never tire of repeating, would have been impossible if we'd followed his advice, that 9 million people have now come off furlough. Unemployment is 2 million lower than predicted. Job vacancies, Mr. Speaker, are 10% higher than they were before the pandemic began. Business insolvencies are lower than before the pandemic began. He wants 3-word slogans, Mr. Speaker. I'll give him a 3-word slogan. Our 3-word slogan is get a jab. And get a jab. And by the way, what we're also doing is help people to get a job. We're turning jabs into jobs. That's the agenda of this government, by taking sensible, cautious decisions, rolling out the vaccines in the way that we have. We have been able to get this country moving and to keep it moving. And I've listened to him very carefully this morning. I have absolutely no idea what he proposes to do instead, except keep us all in some sort of perpetual lockdown and limbo. He has no answer to the question of if not now, when. He has no plan, he has no ideas, and he has no hope, Mr. Speaker. And whilst we in this government are getting on with getting our country through the pandemic and delivering on the people's priorities.
Craig Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Levelling Up Fund is a very welcome investment in Montgomeryshire. It's a game changer for our county council and critical investment at this very critical time. Specifically, we would like to reopen the Montgomery Canal. It's our levelling up bid. It sadly was disconnected from the UK network some decades ago and has been kept alive by a terrific team of volunteers. Will the Prime Minister use the weight of his office and, like the Secretary of State for Wales, jump on the boat, get this investment over the waterline and deliver this levelling up bid in mid-Wales?
Prime Minister.
I congratulate my honourable friend on the campaign he's running for what sounds like an absolutely beautiful plan to reopen the Montgomery Canal. He won't have long to wait for the decision on that scheme, but I can assure him that Wales is receiving thumping quantities of the UK's Levelling Up Fund. Already 5% of total UK allocations in the first round will be in Wales, and I thank him for the lobbying that he's put in today.
Let's go to the Leader of the SNP, Ian Blackford.
Thank you very much. Of course, while they're talking about levelling up on the government benches, we in Scotland are looking at settling up for the people of Scotland. Mr Speaker, I hope the Prime Minister will be reflecting on the judgment from the Parliamentary and Health Ombudsman yesterday that judged that there was maladministration in dealing with the 1950s WASPy women. It's about time that the government delivered justice for those involved. Mr Speaker, last night we heard from the Prime Minister's former Chief of Staff. On the 15th of October, the Prime Minister didn't believe that the NHS would be overwhelmed and thought that the over-80s should be sacrificed to the whims of the deadly virus. The Prime Minister wrote those words whilst our NHS was facing the darkest moments in its history. While doctors and nurses were fighting to contain the pandemic, the Prime Minister was actively pushing for the virus to be allowed to run rampant through towns and cities. The Prime Minister was willing, in his own words, to allow the bodies to be piled high. Mr Speaker, on October the 15th, 2020, 60,000 people had already died. How can anyone have put faith and trust in a Prime Minister who actually typed the words, "Get COVID and live longer"?
Mr Speaker, I think that the right honourable gentleman grossly mischaracterises the substance of those discussions. What I said, I've made points in the House of Commons already in the chamber about the language that I'm alleged to have used. But I think what everybody in this country understands is that the decisions that we had to take at that time were incredibly difficult. And of course, this in no way detracts from the grief and the suffering of those who have lost loved ones to COVID, whose families have been hit by the consequences of that disease. But as I said earlier to the Labour leader, we have to balance very, very difficult harms on either side. There are no good ways through, Mr. Speaker. A lockdown also causes immense suffering and a loss of life chances and damage to health and to mental health. And in due course, the right honourable gentleman knows very well that there will be a chance to look at all of this in a full public inquiry. But I must tell the House that I am content that we followed the scientific guidance and we did whatever we could to save life and to minimise suffering, and of course, to protect our wonderful NHS.
Blackford.
Is that it? Is that it, Prime Minister? Because, you know, the reality is that the Prime Minister wrote these words himself. The over-80s were expendable. A Prime Minister is charged with protecting society, not putting folk at risk of an early death. Such a glib attitude towards human life is indefensible. The Prime Minister is simply not fit for office. The clear pattern throughout this pandemic is that it's one rule for them and another rule for the rest of us. The reality, Mr. Speaker, that the only way to get to the full truth over this UK government's disastrous handling of the pandemic is for this cabal to be made to answer under oath. So will the Prime Minister confirm that in the interests of public health and confidence that the COVID inquiry will begin immediately and commit to appearing at the inquiry himself under oath before any general election is called?
Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I appreciate why it's so important for this country to have a full public inquiry, and that's why I made the announcement to the House that we would. and I also think that it's right that it should go ahead as soon as is reasonable. I don't think that right now, in the middle of a third wave, when we're seeing many of the key people involved in fighting the pandemic who were very, very heavily occupied, I don't think it's right to ask them to devote a lot of their time to a public inquiry of the kind that I think we would all want to see. And that's why I think it's right that it should start in the spring, when I'm pretty confident, and so are the rest of the scientific community, that we will really be in a much, much better position and able to go ahead. And that is the time to begin the public inquiry. But that doesn't mean, Mr. Speaker, that we aren't continuing to learn lessons all the time.
We now have David Davis online. David Davis.
Mr. Speaker, 40 years ago, this country led the world in social mobility. Since then, we've fallen so far behind, we're now only 21st in the world rankings. If we're to succeed at levelling up the UK, then we must restore social mobility for working class pupils right across the country. The fastest and most cost-effective way to do that is to re-engineer the classroom, to capitalise on the benefits of modern technology, using artificial intelligence to provide lessons tailored to the ability of each and every child. Countries around the world are already doing this, from America to Australia, China to Estonia. And private schools in the UK, including Eton, are already doing it using world-class British technology. Will the Prime Minister undertake to use modern technologies to give every working class child the opportunity to reach their full potential, opportunity based on their abilities, not on where they grew up or how rich their parents were?
Prime Minister.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'm thankful to my right honourable friend for the personal tutorial he gave me in with using a laptop in the opportunities provided by this type of technology, and the massive increase in the cognitive powers of kids that is now made possible by these types of technology. And we are looking at supporting schools across the whole of the UK with this kind of advance as we continue to level up.
Sir Geoffrey Donaldson.
Mr. Speaker, in light of the judicial ruling in the High Court that the Northern Ireland Protocol repeals Article 6 of the Act of Union, which allows for unimpeded trade within the United Kingdom and between the constituent parts of the UK, what does the Prime Minister intend to do to fully restore the Act of Union for Northern Ireland and remove the Irish Sea border?
Prime Minister.
I'm grateful to the right honourable gentleman, and this is my first opportunity publicly to congratulate him on becoming leader of the DUP. I look forward to working with him and with the whole of the executive in Northern Ireland for the people in Northern Ireland. As we've made clear, and as we'll be setting out today, we want to sort out the issues in the protocol. We think there are practical steps you can take to do that. And as far as the court case is concerned, nothing in the protocol affects the territorial integrity of the United Kingdom or Northern Ireland's place within it.
Let's see if we can pick up the pace with Theo Clark. Theo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last Friday, I joined local health officials and members of the public at a consultation meeting on maternity services in Staffordshire. Maternity was temporarily suspended at Stafford's County Hospital at the height of the pandemic so that wards could be used to treat COVID-19 patients. But does my right honourable friend agree with me that anyone who wants to give birth at Stafford's County Hospital should be able to do so?
Let's go to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister.
My honourable friend raises a very, very important point, and a lot of the hospitals that I've been around recently are doing incredible work at getting back to pre-COVID levels of service, and I understand that NHS partners are working hard to explore options for restoring maternity services at a county hospital.
Stephen Timms.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Together with the chairs of the committees dealing with social security in the Scottish Parliament, the Senedd and the Northern Ireland Assembly, we've made a call that the £20 a week cut in universal credit due in October should not go ahead. A new Joseph Rowntree Foundation report shows that if it does go ahead, out-of-work families with children will have an income way below what the general public regards as the minimum necessary for an acceptable standard of living. Instead of cutting down, will the Prime Minister not follow his own policy and level up and leave the £20 a week in place?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, what we want to do is level up across the whole of the UK by increasing jobs, access to high-wage, high-skilled jobs, and getting people off benefits and into work. And really that is the big difference between his party and the party I lead. We want to help people into work, and I'm afraid that, as so often, Labour wants to keep them on welfare. I don't think that's the right way forward. We want to see higher wages, and that's why we've increased the living wage by record amounts, and that's why we are working to ensure that this is a jobs-led recovery, and all the signs are at the moment that is succeeding. But of course, it depends on people getting those jabs and when they're asked to.
Let's go to Alberta Costa. Alberta.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the cautious move to step 4 this week, which has only been made possible due to the fantastic vaccine rollout in South Leicestershire and across our country, and the fact that every adult has now been offered the vaccine. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that if we don't move forward now, we risk opening up later in the autumn or winter when the NHS is under more pressure and children have returned to school, which seems to be the reckless approach of the party opposite?
Is spot on. He's completely right. The question for those who attack the current policy is if not now, when? We looked at the data this morning with the Chief Medical Officer, and he pointed out the extraordinary difference in between the number of people being hospitalised now in the older generations and the number of people who are being hospitalised in previous waves amongst the older generations. Thanks to the vaccine rollout, we have radically changed the way the disease affects our society. It's that change that's enabling us to make the progress that we are. And as he says, if not now, when?
Let's go to Rosie Cooper. Rosie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government claims that fires in schools are very rare and are mostly confined to one room or cause little or no damage. The fire at Asmore Primary School in my constituency last month severely damaged 3 rooms, spreading far beyond the original site. This has had a devastating effect on the school, and the pupils now face 18 months of disruption to their education. Would the Prime Minister commit to a mandate that all new build schools and major refurbishments are installed with sprinklers so that schools don't suffer the same fate as Asmore Primary in Ormskirk?
Prime Minister.
I thank the Honourable Lady very much, and I want to thank also the fire service for their outstanding response to the fire at Asmore Primary School. I'm sorry for the disruption that children are experiencing. We can't be complacent about fires at all, let alone fires in schools, and the Department for Education is consulting on guidance to improve fire safety in schools further. And I would encourage the Honourable Lady to make representations in that consultation.
Margaret Furry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of my constituents has recently attempted to sell a house only for the surveyor and estate agent to inform him that they require an external wall system certificate. However, under current Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors guidance, an EWS 1 form should not be expected for properties and buildings under 18 metres high, which includes my constituent's property in Cambuslang. Will the Prime Minister clarify if the UK Government intends to take any steps to ensure lenders and others adhere to RICS guidance on EWS 1 forms, and will he meet with me to discuss how I can assist my constituent?
Prime Minister.
The Honourable Lady makes an extremely important point, and that's why my right honourable friend, the Housing Secretary, will be making a statement to the House shortly, because we must be clear that the risk from fire to life in homes is very, very low, and leaseholders should not be trapped in their properties, unable to buy or to sell, because their properties have been unfairly maligned in that way. And lenders and valuers should not be asking for EWS 1 forms on buildings below 18 metres. My right honourable friend, the Housing Secretary, will be setting out more in a bit later on about how we propose to ensure that that doesn't happen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Dame Vera Lynn did so much for our nation. Now a fitting memorial is planned on the White Cliffs of Dover. To ensure this national icon continues to be celebrated for decades to come. Does my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, agree that Dame Vera was a great inspiration to women, showing the difference we can make and her contribution throughout the whole of her life to our national life? Will he extend his support to this important Dame Vera Lynn National Memorial Project?
Prime Minister, I think we can all unite.
Yes, I think, Mr. Speaker, this is a pretty safe bet for everybody. We all remember and love the songs of Dame Vera Lynn, and she brought the whole country together at a pretty dark time, and is a great inspiration for many people. And I thank my honourable friend for the campaign that she's leading for a fitting memorial, and very happy to support it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, since July 2019, the Department for Work and Pensions have undertaken 124 internal process reviews following the deaths, Mr. Speaker, of 97 claimants, and 27 where claimants suffered serious harm, a threefold increase since 2012. Not once was this mentioned in the Health and Green Disability paper last night. Many believe that this is just the tip of the iceberg, and many also believe that the government can no longer keep marking their own homework. We need to understand the true scale and causes of these deaths in an independent public inquiry. So will the Prime Minister meet with me and with the delegation of bereaved relatives to discuss this?
I thank the honourable lady very much, and I hope the House will forgive me if I say I didn't catch every word of what she said, but I believe that she was referring to the tragic death of those who are claiming benefits, and I'm certainly determined to make sure that she gets a full account of what we're doing to put this right, and that she will meet with the relevant minister as soon as that can be arranged.
Corin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week I met with one of Truro's daffodil farmers, and there is real concern in the industry that they won't be able to have their daffodil pickers in the fields this January. Now, I know the DWP is working with the Duchy College and is hoping to run a local sector-based work academy, but this is a complex issue. We're requiring a long-term solution, and I wonder if my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, would meet with me and other Cornish MPs to see how we could resolve this long-term.
Prime Minister.
I'm only happy to meet my honourable friend at any time, but I can assure her that we want to find the workforce to pick the flowers, the beautiful Cornish daffodils that should not be born to blush unseen, as it were. If I remember the quote right, they should be properly picked, and in addition to developing the local developing the local labour force, and making sure that we line up younger people or people across Cornwall with the opportunities that there are. She must not forget that thanks to the EU settlement scheme, there are 6 million EU nationals still entitled to live and work in this country who have taken advantage of that scheme. And never let it be said that we've done an injustice to that group.
Thank
you, Mr. Speaker. Local residents in Lancaster are opposing the conversion of a popular local pub, the Britannia, into a 10-bed student let. Now, the Housing Secretary says that the current planning system doesn't give people influence over local developments, but his party's Developers Charter gags local residents and hands power to a Whitehall-appointed board of developers, resulting in low-quality, unaffordable housing. So isn't this the case of the Prime Minister paying back his party's developer paymasters by selling out local communities?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I don't think I've heard such total cobblers in all my life, except possibly from the Leader of the Opposition. That is absolutely that is not what the bill does. On the contrary, it gives local people the power to protect. If I understood her correctly, it was a pub, I think, called the Britannia, that she wanted to protect. There are measures that we're bringing forward to allow local people to protect such places of vital local importance, and when it comes to development, actually, the power will remain vested firmly with local people to make sure that they protect their green space, they protect the green belt, and they only have development in the places where they, the local people, want it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure my right honourable friend is not surprised. People are keen to move to my North Devon constituency, but we, like much of the South West, are experiencing severe housing shortages. Local government needs urgent help and support now, but might he consider, as part of planning reforms, binding covenants being applied to a proportion of new builds to be used as a primary residence and not a holiday let or second home, and that existing homes must register for a change of use if becoming a holiday let, to ensure vibrant coastal communities do not become winter ghost towns?
Prime Minister.
My honourable friend is a massively effective advocate for the people of North Devon, and she's made these points to me before, and I know that she's right. We've put higher rates of stamp duties, she knows, on the buying of additional properties such as second homes. But what we've also got to do is make sure that young people growing up around our country, rather contrary to the instincts of the previous Labour Speaker, have the chance of home ownership in the place where they live, and that's what our First Home scheme will help to do, with a new discount of at least 30% prioritised for first-time buyers.
Richard Burke.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is having to self-isolate just as hundreds of thousands of people across the country are having to do because of his reckless COVID strategy. But unlike the Prime Minister, not everybody has been able to run off to a luxury country mansion with a heated swimming pool. And also, unlike the Prime Minister, so many people across our country are having to survive on just £96 sick pay per week. So could the Prime Minister survive on £96 sick pay per week? And if he couldn't, why does he think if it's not good enough for him, it's good enough for everyone else?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, he's quite wrong, because everybody who's self-isolating is entitled, in addition to the equivalent of the living wage and statutory sick pay, they're entitled also to help in extreme circumstances from their local councils, and also to a £500 payment to help them with self-isolation. And it remains absolutely vital that everybody does it.
Let's go to Bill Wigan. Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given the global pandemic, public criticism of my right honourable friend's extraordinary leadership should be dismissed. He put the lives of my constituents first and has had to adapt to the lessons that COVID-19 has taught us. Sadly, the same cannot be said for the handling of tuberculosis by DEFRA. Will my right honourable friend meet me to discuss the current TB strategy and how we can improve it?
Prime Minister.
I'm always delighted to meet my right honourable friend, and I can tell him that, I listened to him and I learned from him about bovine TB and badgers. We do think that the badger cull has led to a reduction in the disease, but nobody wants to continue, and I'm sure that my honourable friend doesn't want to continue with the cull of a protected species, beautiful mammals, indefinitely. And so I do think it's a good thing that we're accelerating other elements of our strategy, particularly vaccination. I must tell him I do think that is the right way forward, and I do think we should begin, if we can, to phase out badger culling in this country.
Sarah Olney.
you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, 1 million children, including my own daughter, were out of school last week due to the need to self-isolate when there's a positive test confirmed in their bubble. Can I firstly just pay tribute to all the teachers, both in my constituency and across the country, who have done incredible work in keeping learning going under such difficult circumstances. And I was really pleased to be able to thank my daughter's school teacher in person yesterday. Can the PM confirm that the government's approach to managing this pandemic will guarantee that all children will have an uninterrupted academic year when they return to school after the summer break?
Prime Minister.
She's absolutely right to focus on the needs of children in this pandemic and the paramount importance of keeping them in school. And we will do everything we can to ensure that we are able to get schools back in September. I have every confidence that we will be able to, but that will be greatly assisted, as I've never tired of repeating, Mr. Speaker, this afternoon, that will be assisted if everybody goes and gets their second jab, or first jab.
Mr. Speaker, as chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Missing People, every year 180,000 people are reported to the police as missing from across our constituencies in the United Kingdom. And I'm sure the Prime Minister and everyone in this House will find that completely unacceptable. The Home Office's strategy on missing people has not been reviewed since 2011. Will the Prime Minister please urgently get this strategy reviewed and updated? And with that, will the Prime Minister meet the Missing People's Charity, Children's Society and myself to look at this very important issue affecting our society?
Prime Minister.
I thank my honourable friend, and I would just remind him that 95% of missing persons incidents are actually resolved without anybody coming to harm, or without the missing individual coming to harm. But I thank him for the work that he does on this issue, because it matters a great deal, clearly, to the remaining 5%, which is an unacceptably high level of suffering. And I'm certainly determined that we should continue to work with all the relevant agencies, the police, social services, to improve our response. And I will be very happy to take up his offer and ensure that he gets the meeting that he needs.
Final question, Dr. Lisa Cameron, please.
Many thanks, Mr. Speaker. As chair of the Disability All-Party Group, I hosted a Disability Confident workshop for members of Parliament, and I'm delighted that we are now approaching 25% of cross-party MPs being accredited as Disability Confident employers. So would the Prime Minister become a Disability Confident employer himself, encourage colleagues to do so, and put his support behind improved representation and inclusion in Parliament for people with disabilities?
Prime Minister.
I thank the honourable lady very much for her suggestion that the government should become a disability confident employer. I'm sure that we already are, but I will investigate the matter and make sure that she gets an answer by letter. Thank you very much.
I will now stand down your standing Prime Minister as well, and just to say to everybody, please, when we get back, we've got to get through more questions. We've got to get back on time. So let's work for each other. So now we're suspending the House for 3 minutes to enable necessary arrangements to be made for the next business order. Order. I now call Secretary Brandon Lewis to make the statement. So state.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And with permission, I will now make a statement on the Government's approach to the Northern Ireland Protocol, which is simultaneously being made in the other place by my right honourable noble friend, Lord Frost, the Minister of State at the Cabinet Office. The Northern Ireland Protocol was designed to achieve a delicate balance between a number of different aims. It reflected a truly extraordinary compromise by the Government in 2019, driven by our steadfast commitment to the Belfast Good Friday Agreement in all of its dimensions. Just over a year afterwards, we also agreed the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, the broadest and most far-reaching such agreement that has ever been struck. Together, these offered the building blocks of a strong, constructive partnership between the UK and the EU as sovereign equals. And yet, we have not been able to unlock the potential of that new partnership in full yet. And the impact of the current protocol is at the heart of that. There is no doubt that we have tried to operate the protocol in good faith. We worked throughout 2020 to finalise the areas left open by the protocol text itself, without, of course, knowing what the real-world impacts on the ground will be, as is the case with negotiations. We are planning already to invest and are in the process of investing around £500 million in delivering systems and support services. We have worked with businesses to help their preparations for the new trading arrangements. But as we have sought to operate the protocol, it is clear that its burdens have been the source of considerable and ongoing disruption to lives and livelihoods. We have seen reductions in supermarket product lines. We have seen more than 200 suppliers decide they would no longer sell to Northern Ireland. And we have seen difficulties not just on the famous chilled meats, but also on medicines, on pets, on movements of live animals, on seeds and plants. Nowhere is this more visible than in the fact that the Northern Ireland Protocol means that Northern Ireland accounts for 20% of all the EU documentary checks on products of animal origin, despite a population of only 1.8 million people. What is worse, these burdens will get worse, not improve over time, as the grace periods expire, leaving businesses facing ever more unsustainable burdens. These impacts risk being felt in the fabric of our union too. All dimensions of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement need to be respected. Northern Ireland's integral place in our United Kingdom just as much as the North-South dimension. Yet there is a growing sense in Northern Ireland that we have not found this balance. Seen in an ongoing political climate, a difficult one, protests and regrettable instances of disorder, and strains within a power-sharing executive already dealing with an unprecedented pandemic. We have worked with the EU to try to address these challenges. Some avenues for progress have been identified in certain areas, but overall, these discussions have not got to the heart of the problem. Put simply, we cannot go on as we are. We have therefore had to consider all our options. In particular, we have looked carefully at the safeguards provided by Article 16 of the Protocol. They exist to deal with the significant societal and economic difficulties, as well as trade diversion. And there has been significant disruption to east-west trade, a significant increase in trade on the island of Ireland as companies change supply chains, and considerable disruption to everyday lives. There has also been societal instability, seen most regrettably with the disorder across Northern Ireland at Easter. Indeed, what could be seen as a false but raw perception in the unionist community of separation from the rest of the United Kingdom has had profound political consequences. These are very serious effects which have put people, businesses and the institutions of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement under strain. It is plainly clear that the circumstances exist to justify the use of Article 16. Nevertheless, we have concluded that this is not the right moment to do so. Instead, we see an opportunity to proceed differently, to find a new path, to seek to agree with the EU, through negotiations, a new balance in our arrangements covering Northern Ireland to the benefit of all. And it is in that spirit that today's command paper outlines the new balance we wish to find. It is a balance which needs to ensure that goods can circulate much more freely within the UK customs territory, whilst ensuring that full processes are applied to goods destined for the EU. It's a balance which needs to enable all in Northern Ireland to continue to have normal access to goods from the rest of the UK by allowing goods meeting both the UK and EU standards to circulate there. And it's a balance which needs to normalise the basis of the protocol's governance, so that the relationship between us and the EU is no longer policed by the EU institutions and the Court of Justice, We should return to a normal treaty framework, similar to other international agreements, that is more conducive to the sense of genuine and equitable partnership that we seek. We also recognise our share of responsibility in helping the EU protect its single market. We are willing to explore exceptional arrangements around data sharing and cooperation and penalties in legislation to deter those looking to move non-compliant products from Northern Ireland to Ireland. And I repeat, all of this is entirely consistent with maintaining an open border without infrastructure or checks between Ireland and Northern Ireland. These proposals will require significant change to the Northern Ireland Protocol. We do not shy away from that. We believe such change is necessary to deal with the situation we now face. We look to open a discussion on these proposals urgently. At the same time, we must provide certainty and stability for businesses as we do so. So we believe we should also quickly agree a standstill period, including maintaining the operation of grace periods in force and a freeze on existing legal actions and processes to ensure there is room to negotiate and to provide a genuine signal of good intent to find ways forward. Mr. Speaker, the difficulties we have in operating the Northern Ireland Protocol are now the main obstacle to building a relationship with the EU that reflects our strong common interests and values. Instead of that, we're seeing a relationship that is being punctuated with legal challenges and characterised by disagreement and mistrust. We do not want that pattern to be set, not least of all because it does not support stability in Northern Ireland. It is now the time to work to establish a new balance, which both the UK and the EU can invest in, to provide a platform for peace and prosperity in Northern Ireland and allow us to set out on a new path of partnership with the EU. We have today set out an approach which we believe can do just that. We urge the EU to look at it with fresh eyes and work with us to seize this opportunity and put our relations on a better footing. We stand ready to deliver the brighter future that is within reach. And I commend this statement to the House.
Now come to the Shadow Secretary of State, Louise Hay.
Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the Secretary of State for advance sight of his statement. Almost 2 years ago, this Prime Minister negotiated every dot and comma of the Northern Ireland Protocol. He said it would mean no checks between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. He described it as an ingenious solution in perfect conformity with the Good Friday Agreement. And he was not alone. The Lord Frost said he was pleased and proud to secure this excellent deal for the UK. And the Secretary of State wrote that it would allow all businesses to trade unhindered across the UK. Today, not for the first time, he is back before Parliament to renege on those promises and discredit the deal his government were authors and cheerleaders for, claiming they couldn't possibly have known what the real-world impacts on the ground would be. The country will be asking, once again, is this bad faith or incompetence? Whichever it is, the shambolic approach, the dishonesty, the recklessness and the utter ineptitude has come at a real cost. It has destroyed trust in the UK government, an essential component of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. It has fanned the flames of instability. And as ever, in the middle of this are the communities and businesses of Northern Ireland who have been repeatedly failed. Because today, ahead of another difficult summer, a resolution is further away than ever. Today, businesses and communities needed reassurance. They needed to see the Secretary of State announce to this House an agreement on a sustainable way forward that will fix the problems the Prime Minister created. Instead, they have more political brinkmanship, more threats to tear up the protocol with nothing to take its place. Communities are tired of these games from a government they have totally lost trust in. They just want to see sustainable solutions. All of us want to see serious proposals that lower the barriers down the Irish Sea and protect the economic integrity of the United Kingdom. So can the Secretary of State outline whether these proposals have any hope of gaining support? Can he tell the House what conversations he has had with his counterparts that lead him to believe this approach will be successful? How did the Taoiseach respond to his call with the Prime Minister yesterday, given the government's strategy so far has left Anglo-Irish relations at an all-time low? And how is he intending to bring the people of Northern Ireland, their representatives, into these discussions so that they have a direct relationship with the EU, clearly necessary given that this government have demonstrated they have no understanding of Northern Ireland and the delicate balance of identities that must be protected. Does he accept that these proposals bring us right back to square one of the Brexit debates, rehashing arguments around alternative arrangements that have long been rejected and returning the debate to the border north-south on the island of Ireland? What is the time frame for these talks? The command paper is entirely silent on how they will proceed and whether there is any agreement from the EU that they should. Mr. Speaker, this ongoing standoff is having consequences not just for Northern Ireland, but for our relationships with current and future trading partners. The eyes of many governments around the world are on the noble Lord Frost and the Secretary of State this afternoon. President Biden, Prime Minister Ardern are among many who want to know that the UK will abide by international law, by the agreements that they signed, and be a partner they can trust. These endless games are shredding our international reputation and undermining our ability to secure trade deals that are in the best interest of the UK. Mr. Speaker, as we have acknowledged many times in this House, peace in Northern Ireland is still fragile. Advancing the peace process has always required responsibility, honesty and leadership, qualities which are in short supply in this government. Too often in recent years, the Prime Minister has put his own interests over and above the interests of Northern Ireland. They are sick to death of being put in the middle of these games. Another Brexit Groundhog Day, another standoff with the EU. It's time to get real, show some responsibility and find a genuinely sustainable way forward.
State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I was kind of waiting in there for a point at which the Honourable Lady would actually stand up for the United Kingdom and the people of Northern Ireland in getting a solution. And I would just say to her that I would remind her that one of the things she may want to think about doing is joining the UK government in terms of making the point to the EU that they also have a responsibility which they have previously accepted, but actually they need to deliver on in terms of the people of Northern Ireland. In January, there was an agreement to work at pace. We're now in July and issues remain unresolved. We saw the attempt to trigger Article 16 by the EU in a way that for many detrimentally affected the institutions or the sense of feeling around the institutions of the Good Friday Belfast Agreement, and we are still dealing with the fallout from that action. That's just a reality of where we are. And we want the EU to engage with these proposals. We have sought for the EU to engage in proposals in good faith, a dozen or more papers that we have put to them about ways to move forward. The reality of where we are now is instead of having a continual piecemeal approach and dealing with things as we go along and coming up against these grace periods that cause disruption for businesses and communities, we think it is right to take an approach that deals with the problem in the round, not just the symptoms, but the underlying problem that we need to see corrected. And I would suggest that the opposition would do better to defend the people of Northern Ireland and the UK than to continue to defend the EU in the actions they take to undermine the strength of the integral market of the people of the United Kingdom. We do have good relationships, and I have good relationships, as does the Prime Minister, with our counterparts, both the Taoiseach and his ministers, the Foreign Minister and the Tánaiste in Ireland, and we continue to develop on those. And I would just say to the Honourable Lady that it is a bit rich for her to talk to us about understanding Northern Ireland, when not only do prominent members of her own party, including the former Home Secretary, claim that Labour is not even a unionist party, but this is a party in Labour that doesn't even stand candidates in Northern Ireland. We will continue to do what is right for the United Kingdom. We want to work with our partners in the EU. When people get a chance to read through the command paper, they will see that we are not taking the opportunity to trigger Article 16 because we want to work in partnership, find a solution to all of these problems that work for people in Northern Ireland. And at the moment, when you've even got the Chief Rabbi and the President of the Board of Deputies coming together to make it clear the substantial problems of the Jewish community in Northern Ireland, it should make it clear this is a problem for communities right across Northern Ireland, and we have a duty to resolve it, not play politics with it.
Let's go to Sir William Cash. Sir William.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Under the current arrangements, which have just been announced, I greatly welcome the Prime Minister's, Lord Frost's and the Secretary of State's realistic and reasonable approach. Does my right honourable friend agree that in the unique circumstances of Northern Ireland, as set out in the protocol, the EU must understand that having recently and democratically left the EU, the United Kingdom rejects the EU's legalistic intransigence, but will continue to negotiate in the short term on the clear understanding that our national interest requires equal reasonableness and realism by the EU, or the government will take the necessary steps just outlined by the Secretary of State, and that the government means what it says.
My honourable friend is absolutely right. We do want to take that approach. The reality of the outworkings of the protocol in practice is they are having a detrimental effect. And this is one of the key things in the opening parts of the protocol itself, that we would not disrupt the everyday lives of people in their communities. And regardless of people's constitutional view in Northern Ireland, this is having an impact. That's why the First Minister has also pointed to issues that she wants to see resolved in the protocol itself as well as obviously people across the communities having issues. We need to get this resolved for all of the people of Northern Ireland, and my honourable friend is absolutely right. We need to do this in a realistic way, recognising the challenges on the ground, and to deal with it as partners with the EU in a way that can deliver for the people of Northern Ireland, and understanding that, of course, Northern Ireland is an integral part of the United Kingdom.
We now go to SNP spokesperson Richard Thompson. Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the Secretary of State for advance sight of his statement. Let's not lose sight, a protocol setting the terms of trade has only been made necessary because of an EU withdrawal agreement which the Prime Minister, irrespective as to its entirely foreseeable impact in Northern Ireland, defined the parameters of himself and then signed up to freely. Now, everybody knows that Article 16 exists, but the continued threats for the UK government to deploy it have worn so thin as to be utterly transparent in every sense, and can be doing little to help increase the trust and confidence necessary for the government to achieve its stated objectives. And let's also be clear, if we move from the current agreement, then there will have to be another put in place, which is likely to differ in substance, to use a phrase, only in limited and specific ways from that which it will be replacing. So if the UK government wishes to return to the freest possible conditions for movement of goods between GB and Northern Ireland, consistent with its international obligations, it could sign up right now to a dynamic deal on food and animal welfare standards. Now, a pragmatic renegotiation of the protocol in light of experience and in light of everything that's come from the nature of Brexit would be desirable, clearly, in order to remove not just the barriers that exist, but also the symbolism that these trade frictions are causing, which are being felt so keenly in Northern Ireland at the present moment. So in that regard, will the Secretary of State ensure that the government, in contrast to its approach to Brexit to date, sets the tone of all its discussions with the EU in good faith around the negotiating table, rather than through the pages of the Telegraph or the tabloids, and at all times in a manner which builds, rather than undermines, the trust necessary to be able to secure a better deal for the people of Northern Ireland?
Well, I would just say to the honourable gentleman that, of course, as I outlined in my statement, we are actually not using Article 16. That's something the EU attempted to do, I think, mistakenly earlier this year, which has caused an issue and a sensibility within the unionist community that is still an issue today. And I would suggest that he should sometimes just stand up a bit more for people of Northern Ireland and across the UK as his speaker on this issue, rather than just for the EU. Because when he talks about talking to the media, it is a bit odd for us when we're dealing with the EU to get told by a journalist about a plan for medicines or plan for chilled meats, and it can be days or weeks later before we formally hear from the EU. We do want to work with the EU. That's why we're proposing, as we have done today in our command paper, a way to move forward, to work together, to resolve the core problems rather than continually dealing individually with these symptoms that continues to build those issues around trust and frustration. Ultimately, that's the best way to get a result for the people in Northern Ireland and to have that strong, positive relationship between us as the UK and the EU.
Mark Jenkinson.
As my right honourable friend just referred to, the European Union's attempts to trigger Article 16 early this year caused political reverberations which are still being felt in Northern Ireland. With communities across Northern Ireland now divided in their support for the protocol, does my right honourable friend agree that it is no longer sustainable as it currently stands, and that an internal border that reshapes and undermines our United Kingdom is unacceptable?
Friend makes an important point, and I referenced earlier on the First Minister's using this. I have to say the Deputy First Minister as well has been very clear. There are issues with the protocol that need to be resolved. I can't really remember a single person in Northern Ireland who we've spoken to in the business community or the political community who hasn't identified there are at least some issues that need to be resolved. But there might be difference of opinion about how to do that and the degree of that. We want to do that by agreement with the European Union and recognising the sovereignty of the integral market of the United Kingdom, and to do so in a way that means that consumers and businesses in Northern Ireland can go about their lives, enjoying their lives in the way they always have done as citizens of the United Kingdom.
Jeffrey Donaldson.
We welcome the acceptance by the government that the protocol is not working, that it is causing real harm to our economy in Northern Ireland and is simply not sustainable. The statement today is a welcome and significant and important first step. To be clear, Mr. Speaker, tinkering around the edges simply doesn't work. And I trust that the EU will approach new negotiations in good faith and recognise the need to enter into new arrangements that remove the Irish sea border. For our part, we will apply our 7 tests against any outcome to this process. So will the Secretary of State assure the House that these negotiations will not be dragged out, and if unsuccessful, that the Government will invoke Article 16 to introduce measures that provide for free movement of goods from Great Britain to Northern Ireland, ensure that products complying with British standards are available in Northern Ireland, and that the principle of consent is fully respected and Northern Ireland's place within the United Kingdom is properly and legally protected.
Well, right honourable gentleman makes a series of important points there. And I think it is important that we are very clear that we want to take this forward in a way to negotiate these issues as a whole. As I said earlier on, rather than this piecemeal approach, that we actually solve the underlying issues that are causing so much disruption for businesses and people in Northern Ireland. I think that will be a better way forward, because then we don't have to keep coming back to these things and keep having these issues and challenges around grace periods that just create cliff edges. We have to avoid that. That's why we're suggesting a standstill period as well as we go forward. And I think ultimately this is about recognising this is an issue that affects everybody, the whole community of Northern Ireland, and something that has united people across the community is wanting to see these issues resolved. We think there is a realistic way to do that. We think there's a way to do that within the framework of the protocol. We've always recognised, and we're still clear about this, that the single epidemiological unit of the island of Ireland is something that's been there for a very long time, and and those checks in one form or another since about the 19th century. But we've got to find a way, and we believe there is a way to do this, that ensures that products that are moving from Great Britain to Northern Ireland to be used and consumed in Northern Ireland can flow in the way they would with any other part of the United Kingdom, whilst fulfilling our responsibilities to the EU in terms of helping them ensure they can protect their single market.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I welcome the Secretary of State's statement today, which I think is balanced and pragmatic. The Northern Ireland Protocol was always a difficult compromise, but it was made in good faith to protect the Good Friday Agreement whilst respecting the EU's single market and our own single market and Northern Ireland's place in the United Kingdom. As this command paper makes clear, it has not managed to do that. So could I ask what conversations he's had with the European Union, whether they accept that premise, and if they don't accept it and they won't engage meaningfully in this command paper and the negotiations we want, whether Article 16 does remain on the table?
Well, I say to my honourable friend, obviously, as we've always said, we can't take any options off the table, but we want to work through this in a negotiated way to get a realistic solution that actually delivers for people in Northern Ireland. And I would say to him that we have obviously been speaking consistently over this year, both Lord Foster, myself, with obviously the Cabinet Office lead on the negotiation around the protocol, but with the European Commissioner, with Maros Šefčovič directly. And I think the European Commission do recognise there are issues that need to be resolved. The challenge we have had is actually getting agreement on those resolutions. And one of the reasons we took the action we took back in March to extend the grace periods was because we got to a point where we needed an agreement in order to be able to ensure we were able to keep food products on the shelves. And it was interesting at the time when we saw the EU not complaining about the process, the issues we were dealing with, but actually the fact we hadn't done it by agreement. And this comes to a point the Honourable Lady made in her opening remarks. To work by agreement, ultimately we need the EU, our partners, to also come to agree things in the first place. But we haven't managed to achieve that yet, but I am hopeful that with where we are now and with the proposal we're putting forward, there's, as I say, a realistic way to do that in the months ahead.
We come to Colin Beeswood. Colin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Northern Ireland is uniquely placed to prosper from this deal. That's a direct quote from the Secretary of State last Christmas Eve. Then, on New Year's Day, he said, "There is no Irish sea border. The government and businesses are keeping goods flowing freely between GB and NI." But then, earlier this month, he said, "The current arrangements could corrode the link between Northern Ireland and the rest of the United Kingdom." This statement, Mr. Speaker, is the second attempt in 1 week that this government has made to distance itself from agreements that they have negotiated. Why does he think that any other country or any person in Northern Ireland would trust anything that this government says from this day forward.
Well, I would actually say to the honourable gentleman, if we look at the implications and the outwork of the protocol, it's something that's a frustration and a problem for people across communities. I think it would be wrong of us as a government to not recognise there are problems with the protocol in the way that it is being implemented on the ground that are causing problems for consumers and for businesses. I can't believe for a moment that he would want the government to sit back and see that continue and see his constituents be detrimentally affected by the way the EU wants to see this implemented, and that's why I think it is important that we find a way forward to deliver this in a way that works for people across all of Northern Ireland.
Let's go to Sir Bernard Jenkins. Bernard.
Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I very much welcome my right honourable friend's statement and today's white paper. Is he aware of anybody serious who now doubts that the protocol is failing in its own terms by causing, to use the words from the protocol, serious economic and societal difficulties and diversion of trade, which is a threat to the Belfast Good Friday Agreement? Well, the answer is no. And is that what the EU intended when they signed this protocol? Of course not. And that's why all parties should now be able to accept, including the EU, that this is, as the government now does, that this protocol is not working. So can I commend his cautious and reasonable and responsible approach that we're absolutely right to try everything to bring the EU to the negotiating table. But how long have we got before we have to act to safeguard peace and security and political stability in Northern Ireland?
Dave.
Well, my honourable friend makes an important point. I think it is right. And I do think the EU do recognise and want to ensure that we get the right outcome for the people of Northern Ireland. I think they do recognise the sensitivities there. But that's why it's important we deal with the core problem underlying all of the symptoms that we are seeing. And he's also absolutely right around the stability in Northern Ireland. When we are seeing people being very clear, people who are party to the agreement of the Good Friday Belfast Agreement, being very clear about the disruption this causes and the threat this is to the Good Friday Belfast Agreement, it is right that we listen to that. And I think it is right that we get to work on this with the European Union in a spirit of partnership to find a solution to those core problems. Bearing in mind, as I say, there's the protocol itself, the framework of the protocol. If you imagine a place where that's delivering in the way that was always intended with that free flow of goods, then you really do have a huge economic opportunity for the people of Northern Ireland. We need to get to that space in order for it to be something that is sustainable and has the consent of the whole community of Northern Ireland.
Let's go to Stephen Farry. Stephen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This statement is full of bluster and a rewriting of history. It creates more uncertainty and instability. The government is choosing confrontation rather than adopting the obvious solution on the table, which is a comprehensive veterinary agreement. The Secretary of State should know that the only legally sustainable way forward to achieve the necessary flexibilities and mitigations is through agreement with the European Union, either within the protocol or building on the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. So does the Secretary of State recognise that achieving that requires the trust to be built and sustained? But all of the government's actions around the protocol this year have undermined that, including today the empty threat around Article 16.
Well, I would just gently suggest the honourable gentleman looks back at the statement I actually made and has a read of the command paper, because that is looking to form an agreement with the EU and to do this in a way that I think is reasonable and sensible and deals with those fundamental problems that are affecting his constituents as well. And I would again just say to him that he should maybe be standing up for his constituents more than he is standing up for the EU at the moment, in the sense that he seems to be forgetting the fact that it's the EU who had said they would work at pace to resolve these issues 7 months ago. It's the EU who sought to trigger Article 16 that caused so many issues for the unionist community in Northern Ireland, and who have not yet come to agreement on a range of issues that we need to resolve for the people of Northern Ireland. I think it is right, therefore, that we take this opportunity to outline a way we think to move forward in a positive way that can rebuild the relationship with the EU and fundamentally resolve the core issues that are detrimentally affecting so many of his constituents and people across Northern Ireland.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Northern Ireland Protocol was pursued and negotiated by this government less than 2 years ago, and it is a reflection of the decisions made by them in relation to the nature of Brexit. In the statement, the government suggests that it has tried to operate the protocol, but they have not yet pursued the option of making supplementary agreements with the EU which would work within the protocol, such as a veterinary agreement, which businesses such as Marks and Spencer support. So can I ask the Secretary of State, given that he has said that the Article 16 grounds have been met, how many of those businesses that he's consulted with agree with him and have asked him to do that and think it's a sustainable way forward?
Well, I would just suggest, the Honourable Lady, she looks again at the statement of the command paper. We're not suggesting that we're, in fact, I specifically said we're not triggering Article 16. We want to negotiate a solution to the problems for the businesses in Northern Ireland and the consumers there.
Let's go to Bob Blackman. Bob.